You're listening to episode 7 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. Today, we're talking with Rachel Benight all about how to move away from perfectionism in the pursuit of better health. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, Laura Schoenfeld here, your hostess with the mostess. I am so excited. We have an awesome interview for you today, so we're going to get right into things. I have a guest with me today who is one of my mentees. I do some business mentoring, and this is a lady who just launched her private business this year, and it's been super exciting to watch her thrive. And I knew that as I was starting my new podcast that I would love to have her on, since I know that you all will really appreciate her philosophy and her perspective on the topics that we cover today. So today with me is Rachel Benight, and Rachel is a registered dietitian specializing in functional nutrition therapy and an NASM certified personal trainer. She received her master's degree in nutrition and dietetics from the University of Central Oklahoma. Rachel is passionate about helping women reach optimal health without feeling anxious and obsessed with every health decision. She loves helping women find relief from digestive, hormonal, and metabolic issues through realistic and balanced food, exercise, and lifestyle changes. She empowers women to wake up each morning feeling confident that they are making the best decisions for their unique self, not just following a cookie-cutter diet. When Rachel works with her clients, she takes a holistic approach, considering the entire body and not just a set of symptoms. When Rachel is not working with clients, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 dogs in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In her free time, she likes to participate in CrossFit, listen to mystery podcasts, blog about nutrition and fitness, and experiment in the kitchen. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Rachel. We covered some really interesting topics, from restrictive dieting to obsession with food and fitness to faith and how that affects our decisions around our own personal health choices, as well as how we work with clients. So I'm really pumped for this episode. And without further ado, here is Rachel. Well, welcome. I am so excited to have on the show with me today one of my friends and former clients, and just somebody who I've been really excited to watch launch into the world of online nutrition consulting and running her own business, Rachel Benight. Oh, shoot. Yes. I got to make sure.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Yeah. Pronunciation is always like, I'm kind of anal about it. So I'm like, I should have asked you before we jumped on. But Rachel Benight. Rachel is very similar to me in a lot of ways. So I'm excited to have her on the show as far as the kind of clients she works with, her background, her own personal journey with health and fitness and nutrition and all that. And so I just always love having the opportunity to chat with other women who have been through similar backstories and then also have come to similar conclusions about how to really achieve true health and well-being, and not just the, Instagram kind of health and well-being that a lot of us are exposed to. So welcome, Rachel. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I am just completely honored to be on this podcast. I remember listening to you years back when I first became a dietitian. And I remember one time thinking, that would be so cool to be on her podcast one day. And here it's happening. So I'm honored to be here.
Well, it just goes to show you the power of having a vision for what you want to achieve in life. So you
That is
thought
so
it,
true.
and now you're here. So that's really
Yeah.
exciting. And usually with these interviews, I like to introduce my audience to my guests because not everybody knows you. And hopefully after this episode, they'll get to know you better and they'll be following you because they'll see how valuable your knowledge and your content is. But whenever I have an RD on the episode, I always want to ask them how they became a dietitian because I think sometimes the way we get into this field tells a lot about like our own personal journey in the world of health and what we've experienced along the way. So what drove you to become a dietitian, and what was your experience going through the process of the education and becoming a professional nutritionist?
Yeah. So I've always been interested in health, but I would say that I wasn't very healthy about my interest in health, meaning like I would always like put myself on like diets growing up. I was into sports. And so like my idea of a diet was, eating carrots and deli meat and like low fat, slim fasts and things like that. So I always had an interest in it. And then I actually went to school though to be a teacher and took an intro to nutrition class as an elective. And just fell in love with it and actually enjoyed reading the textbook, which was very rare for me. And I talked to my professor about, how I wanted to be a teacher, but like I was really interested in nutrition. And she was like, well, the great thing is like dietitians teach like all the time. So I decided to go ahead and pursue becoming a dietitian, but I still was very much stuck in that like diet mindset. And that's what I thought nutrition was. And even through my education was very conventionally trained as a dietitian. I remember asking my professor actually, whenever we were talking about sugar, it says to limit added sugar, but I was like, what does that mean? And even at the time she was like, well, it just means to limit it. Like there's no like set amount. And I just remember thinking like, that's so not right. Like this needs to be fixed. And so anyway, I was very conventionally trained, didn't understand the concept of like integrative or holistic nutrition until my first job as a dietitian, where I was trained by a dietitian who had been trained through the Institute of Functional Medicine. But my journey getting to become a dietitian, I struggled a lot with anxiety, which, we may end up talking a little bit about with the obsession with health. But I think made it a mission to use nutrition to try to help my anxiety. And so that gave me a really big interest in the beginning with nutrition.
Mm-hmm. So when you were focusing on nutrition as dieting, was it specifically for weight management, or was there that mental health component that you were more focused on?
I mean, growing up, it was always weight management. I had no idea that at the time that nutrition could have any impact on our mental health. And I was never overweight. And I look back now and I just think like how absurd it was that I even tried to go on a diet. I think I just had this like idea in my mind of what I wanted my body to look like. And I wanted a six pack, I didn't want that extra weight on my stomach. And so in my mind, I think it was just wanting to be toner or fitter, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like we're similar enough in age where when we were growing up, and I'm sure it's the same still, honestly, it's probably worse with social media, but I remember it was like a hobby of mine to read fitness magazines. I had to have like 5 subscriptions to like Shape Magazine, Women's Health, and like all those. And first of all, I'm so glad I don't like read that trash anymore because so much of it is so not like helpful. But I also think it was just normal. Like everybody was dieting at some point in their life. Like it almost was like, it doesn't even matter if you have anything that you're trying to change. It just, why would you not be on a diet? Like everybody should be doing it. So I feel like it's probably only gotten worse now with social media, because now it's like you just open your phone and you get to see all the people that are supposedly healthier than you. But I know for me, it was the health magazine habit that I had that was really driving a lot of that, the belief system around what I should be eating, what my body should look like, that kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah. I would cut out pictures of, fitness models and like tape them up to my mirror in my bathroom to like motivate me to, do better, or, it's just silly stuff like that. But
oh yeah, I think I had like Victoria's Secret bikini models on my like background of my computer, which in hindsight, I'm like, that's like really disturbing. But it was like, oh, if I just see that every day, it'll like motivate me to go to the gym and it'll motivate me to eat well. So I'm sure, we laugh about it. There's probably still thousands of women that have that same, like that's their phone background. That's their computer background. There's their vision board with the bikini models on them, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I don't think any of this stuff is different. It's just like a little bit of a different experience as to where that belief system comes from. So you said that you worked for a functional medicine nutritionist or dietitian after getting out of grad school. Was that like total just mind-boggling experience, or was that like, did you already kind of know about that stuff and it was something that you had learned on your own?
No, so it was totally mind-blowing for me. Just the idea that our gut and our brain were connected, like blew my mind when I first started learning about it. I didn't really understand that food could be used as medicine. The only thing that I saw food being used as was a way to lose weight. Because I think that's kind of what or to prevent certain chronic diseases. That's what we're trained in school. At least I was. And so the thought that like food could be used in a preventative manner and also to like really help with, brain health and hormones and gut health and all of those things, I just was totally mind blown, and just like ate it up. I mean, I would spend hours every night, and honestly, it ended up developing into an obsession that I've had to really, keep in check, because it's one thing to, really be interested in all of that, but it's another extreme to be obsessed with it. So, but yeah, I was totally mind blown when I first was introduced to functional medicine, and it totally changed the trajectory. You know what I'm trying to say?
Trajectory.
Yes, of my career as a dietitian.
And it's interesting you said that it started off kind of like an exciting passion, kind of like, wow, this is amazing. I'm, soaking all this stuff in. When did you first notice that it turned into something that felt unhealthy?
So as I mentioned earlier, I've always struggled with anxiety. And I remember just like learning and reading about how the microbiome, the bacteria in our gut could influence our mood, and how potentially, our thyroid health could influence our mood and anxiety. And I was, reading things and listening to podcasts and webinars that would talk about like, you should check out your gut health. And so I started, and, convincing me that medication was the wrong avenue to go down. And so I started doing stool testing on myself and looking at my thyroid and food sensitivity testing and things that ended up leading me to being very restrictive with my diet. I had cut out I wasn't eating fruit except for berries. I was very much like low carb, even though I didn't need to be doing low carb because I was doing high intensity exercise. I was not eating grains. I thought grains were like from the devil. I wouldn't eat white potatoes. I would only eat sweet potatoes because obviously like I know now that was silly, but I couldn't even tell you why then. It was just because they were wrong. And I wouldn't eat beans because beans were too high in carb. All of these just like things I had started to develop from listening to very intelligent people, but people that weren't necessarily speaking to me as like, I wasn't the person they were speaking to, but I took it upon myself to think I was. And so I just started realizing that it was becoming an obsession whenever like my anxiety was actually getting worse. Cause the only thing I could ever think about was what was I going to eat and whether or not like, is this causing me to feel anxious, when the thought just stressing about it was causing me more anxiety. And I feel like my gut issues actually got worse. And I look back now and understand it probably was because I wasn't feeding my microbiome. I, was under a lot of stress, which was, causing me to go into that flight or fight response. And so I actually ended up starting my business for that very reason, because I realized how obsessive I had become, and wanted to step out of that environment some, but then also help other women find freedom in their food choices while still being able to reach their health goals, and in a holistic way.
Yeah, it's kind of I have very similar experience. Maybe not quite so much as far as like being in an environment from a work perspective, because I pretty much went straight into private practice when I graduated from grad school. But being in that like ancestral health, paleo world during my education, I was very dogmatic about things that I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so dumb. So things like saying, oh, carbs are physiologically unconditional, or you don't need to eat them. Your body can make all the carbs that it needs. And like things that were so just like repeating what I heard on things like podcasts or blogs and that kind of thing, and not thinking about context, not thinking about like, what does it mean for something to be essential versus, beneficial, right? Like, yes, your body can produce all the carbs it needs to survive, but is surviving actually the goal, right? Like, there's more than just not dying when it comes to the food choices that you're making. So, and I totally agree. Like what you were saying about that back then, like, and you're a little bit younger than me, so maybe it wasn't as back then as mine was, but a lot of the conversation was about preventing or treating chronic disease like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So women like you and I who are active, not overweight from like a health perspective, maybe dealing with some, like I had hormonal issues. Sounds like I definitely have had anxiety as a challenge in my life. Things that literally were made worse by the same recommendations that are being made for people who have those problems. And there wasn't a lot of nuance back then. Luckily, I think it's so much different now. And there's people like you and me and tons of other people in the field that are not only recognizing the need for diversity as far as like, okay, we're not all just talking to overweight 50-year-old men with like pre-diabetes that don't exercise, like other people in the world that need different approaches. But also just the mindset element of realizing that like, even if you're eating the quote unquote perfect diet for your body and your physiology, if you're stressed about it and you're isolating yourself and you're like, all your thoughts are consumed by the next meal and like your relationships are negatively affected, spending all your time at the gym, I could care less what you're eating because that's not actually creating a healthy life for that person. So I feel like the message that you and I both strongly resonate on is growing, thankfully. But unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of that fear-based decision-making around food. And unfortunately, like you said, I think a lot of the functional medicine world perpetuates it. Mm-hmm. And we've taken things that are good tools, like gut testing, like hormone testing, and turned it into something that's like gospel as far as like, here's your test result, here's exactly what you should do, and don't ask questions. So I assume you've had that experience before.
Yeah. So I also think in the functional medicine world, there are a lot of really sick people that benefit from functional medicine. And we take the recommendations that are being made to someone with, a significant autoimmune disease or Lyme disease or these things that, maybe there is a time and place to be on an elimination diet or, to dive really deep into gut health. But for someone who, is generally healthy, they don't need to necessarily go to those extremes. And I think we automatically, or a lot of functional medicine practitioners automatically think that everyone needs to go to that extreme. And that's when I think can lead to the unhealthy behaviors that we were mentioning.
Yeah. And I feel like because a lot of functional medicine providers are not trained in nutrition, they focus more on what can we take out to make you healthier, as opposed to thinking like, hey, actually, you can't just keep removing things and not replacing them or giving alternatives or making sure the person's getting enough calories because they've cut half their foods out. Like, I think that's where these elimination diets, like even though there's benefit, like you said, most people that go on them have no guidance whatsoever about, hey, if we're going to pull out gluten and grains and potatoes and things that like maybe make up a third of a person's diet, we need to replace that. And what are the things we can replace that with? And how do you make sure you're getting enough? So I feel like that's a approach that hopefully is getting more common. I mean, I'm hoping we're not the only people that are doing it, but I think I work with a lot of women who really got harmed by these approaches that focused on taking things out, fixing everything with supplements, like, not actually looking at supporting the body's ability to heal itself and really just being like, let's just pull everything out so you're not getting these like unhealthy influences, which again, at some point, like you can't starve somebody to better health. So,
it's a great saying. I love that.
Yeah.
I'll have to remember that.
So I wanted to ask you, because I know you work with a lot of women who are trying to either improve their health and or lose extra body fat, probably a little bit of both at the same time. What are some of the biggest eating and training mistakes that you see these women making when trying to accomplish their health and body composition goals?
I think this is such an important question because I actually have made these same mistakes. And so I've learned from my experience. So I do CrossFit. And I think a lot of women in the CrossFit world or in that like Orange Theory, high intensity interval training world are also making these mistakes. And I would say the first one is undereating in general. They think that the whole 1,200 calories recommendation applies to them because for whatever reason, we have very like high standards and we think high expectations for ourselves. So we think we need to be on a diet similar to what we talked about earlier. But just undereating in general, whether it's intentional or unintentional, but then also undereating carbohydrates, something that, again, I was doing. I think the low carb movement and the ketogenic diet and paleo as well are all really popular. And again, those types of diets, if you want to call it that, or that way of eating has its place for certain people. And I'm not against that in any way, but I definitely think that a lot of women, especially if they're still in their, reproductive years and exercising at high intensities, are significantly undereating carbs. And so that's usually the very first thing that I am looking at when I'm working with a client is, number one, are you eating enough? And then number two, are you eating enough carbs? And then the third thing I would say is over-exercising. And I, again, have been guilty of this, was trying to do CrossFit 6 days a week and would sacrifice time with my friends and my family in order to make it to a workout because I would feel guilty if I didn't go, or I feel like I, needed to like compensate by eating less if I didn't go, which was, I was injured all the time. And I look back now and realize why. It's because I was over-exercising and not eating enough. And so those are the things that when women come to me and say, I just seem to hit a plateau or can't seem to lose weight, even though I'm exercising, 5 days a week and eating a diet, usually they're very surprised when I say, well, I think you're actually over-exercising and not eating enough.
Yeah, I feel like based on the eat less, move more mindset, it's almost like, how could that be physically possible?
Yes.
And it was funny because I posted recently a repost from Meg Dahl, who I did a podcast interview with. She had quoted me as saying, like, if you're someone who's exercising 6 days a week and you're having things like hypothalamic amenorrhea or other hormone problems, or just overall not feeling your best, then you need to ask yourself, why am I training that frequently? And it was funny because like people got triggered. People were like, oh, well, I exercise 6 days a week because it's for my mental health and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, listen, like, I'm not saying nobody in the world should exercise 6 times a week. Like just the same way as we're not saying nobody should ever eat keto. That's not the point. The point is that doing 6 days a week because you think that's the quote unquote, like the right thing to do and the healthy thing to do. In the meanwhile, you're, losing out on social connection. You're stressing out about missing your workouts. You're injured all the time. Like that's where you get to a place where you have to ask yourself, what is the point? What is the purpose? Because if it's not actually helping you reach your goals and it's creating dysfunction, then there literally is no purpose. You're not a professional athlete that's like training for the Olympics or something. You don't have to go to the gym 6 days a week. So, and
I would also add to that, if you're just an non-professional athlete, so just an average, like recreational exerciser, you actually will get more benefits if you're prioritizing, rest. So if you're working out 6 days a week, you probably aren't going to see as many improvements in your body composition compared to if you're maybe working out 4 or 5 days a week and giving your body adequate rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, at best case scenario, you'll probably not see substantial improvement over that 4-day a week mark. And worst case scenario, you're actually going to see a deficit of performance or health. And I think that's where my goal, and I know you're on the same page with this, the goal is always to really be clear about why you're making the choices that you're making, because anything can work for anybody. There's plenty of like anecdotal reports about here's what worked for me. And I lost 50 pounds doing keto and I'm, vegan diet makes me feel so energetic. And it's like, that's fine. If they feel great doing that, nobody is saying to stop. because I think that's where people get super triggered, where it's like, you're telling me I can't do what works for me. It's like, no, we're not saying that. We're saying that just because it works for you doesn't mean that it's going to work for every other person on the face of the earth, and for everyone to follow blindly these recommendations without questioning how is it working for me. That's where I think we get into trouble. And I know you definitely are on that same page with your work. Like you said, some of the bigger challenges that women run into is overtraining and undereating, which tends to blow their mind because they're like, what? How is that possible? And I'm sure you get similar clients to me in that situation that are overly focused on perfectionism with the actual habits. So kind of the same question about, why are you doing something? And a lot of times they're doing it because they think that's what they're supposed to do. They don't have like a clear, here's the benefit that I'm getting from this. It's like, oh, because 6 days a week is like what's good and I need to be good. So what kind of tips do you have for women on how to move away from perfectionism in the pursuit of better health?
So I'm so glad you asked this question, because I just had this conversation with the client before I got on the phone or on the interview with you. And actually, whenever I was struggling so much with my own anxiety, I was meeting with a counselor, and he had me go through a really great exercise, which I think would be beneficial for anyone. And he identified what he called unrelenting standards in my life. And so things that I had made a standard for myself that was unrealistic or unrelenting. And rather than telling me to just lower my standard altogether and, be lazy or unproductive or all of those things, he said, I want you to write down what your standard is. So for example, if my standard is I'm going to work out 6 days per week, he said, I want you to write that out. And then I want you to picture what that standard would be like if you lowered it by 20%. So for me, I said, okay, at the time I was like, okay, I'll work out 5 days a week and dedicate 2 days to rest. And I think having actually writing out, what does that look like for you to bring that standard to a more of a realistic place, and having a tangible way that you're going to do that. So maybe for nutrition versus I'm going to eat clean or good 100% of the time, because that was something else that I expected of myself at one point. Setting lowering that standard by 20% and saying, okay, one night a week, I'm going to go on a date with my husband or go out to dinner with my friends and enjoy the meal without worrying about every bite that I put in my mouth. And so really making tangible goals for yourself for how you're going to do it. Because I think it's easy for us to say, well, you need to not be a perfectionist in your health, or, you need to improve your relationship with food. But how do people tangibly do that? And I think it's identifying where their standard is unrelenting, and then actually writing out or considering, okay, how am I going to make that more realistic, and basically where they have a tangible thing that they can go after.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to play devil's advocate, because I think that's a really cool strategy as far as coming up with specific changes. How does that apply to someone who does have to be 100% about certain things in their life? Let's use someone with a celiac disease as an example. They can't just be 80% gluten-free, right?
Right, yeah.
So I think one of the challenges that I run into a lot with people is that they're worried that lowering that standard is actually dangerous, or, oh my gosh, I can't do gluten because it's going to really harm me. How do you navigate that? Because I think with the lowering the standards, for sure, if it's a standard that they can say, oh, well, 6 days a week versus 5 days a week, I'm not going to die if I do 5 days a week. But some of those standards, they can have really strong beliefs around oh, it has to be 100% or it's really going to harm me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's true. Sometimes it actually is true that 100% is required. So how do you navigate that? Because I think for me, and I can talk a little bit about how I approach things, but I always like to think about what's actually valuable versus what's just you're doing it arbitrarily. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, because I totally agree. I'm not going to tell someone with celiac to go, eat gluten once a week to be, more realistic. I definitely was in that place too. Whenever my therapist told me that, I'm like, but if I go and eat a meal out with my husband, I'm going to feel sick. I don't want to feel sick. And so, if I have a client who, is worried about feeling sick, but they don't have a diagnosed gluten allergy or celiac, then I give them tools of, okay, how can we prevent you from feeling sick at a meal? So, potentially like doing activated charcoal or digestive enzymes, things that kind of act as I guess you could say, insurance policy for them to ease their mind that these are things that can help me prevent me from feeling terrible if I, do have gluten, or if I have, a glass of wine or something like that. But if it's someone who, let's say someone that has celiac, I'm not going to tell them to eat gluten, but let's find another thing that brings you pleasure in your life. It doesn't have to be food. It could be self-care, like go and get a massage for yourself or something that, you feel like you're putting up all of these, like, no, you can't do this. No, you can't have that in your life. What are some things that you can have and you can do, and focusing on those things versus the no, you can't. And then of course, I always like to give my celiac patients or clients like alternatives to gluten containing desserts or gluten containing foods, where they feel like they're not constantly, the outlier that doesn't get to have those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the whole food thing can become such a sensitive subject for a lot of people, because our society does emphasize food as being a source of entertainment, pleasure, connection,
Mm-hmm.
Socializing, that kind of thing. So when somebody has a true issue with a food item that is hard to avoid, it's like, well, you can't just turn off your life just to avoid gluten or something like that. It needs to be a strategy for still living a normal life as much as possible while respecting health needs like that.
Definitely.
And from my perspective, I think because there's so much intense beliefs around food and nutrition that exist because of podcasts and blogs and, people you watch the news and it's like, oh, studies show that one piece of chocolate a day is going to cause heart disease. It's like, and that's not real. I just made that up. So nobody stop. Don't go run out and throw all your chocolate away. But just the stuff that we're bombarded with that makes us believe things are true is really over the top. I was even reading an article this morning about how about close to 40% of nutrition studies are proven false at some point, the ones that are peer reviewed and are statistically significant, they are able to prove them false after a period of time. So just knowing that even what we consider true is not always the full picture, or maybe in 10 years from now, we're going to find out that was totally wrong, and having an open mind about not making these rigid black and white, this is true, this is false kind of beliefs about things. Because when I'm talking to a client about, okay, gluten-free, they don't have celiac, but maybe they feel like they don't feel great when they eat gluten. Is that 100% true 100% of the time? Is that always the case, or have you ever eaten gluten and it's okay? Well, I don't know. I guess I had bread when I was on vacation in Italy and it was totally fine. I'm like, okay. So that's an example of when that was not a problem for you to eat. So that means that there's at least a percentage of the time where this is not something that needs to be happening. And I get people are going to say, well, it's different gluten in Europe and blah, blah, blah. So another example is, I always have these digestive symptoms when I eat out, but when I'm on vacation, I can eat anything I want and I'm fine. That's a super common one. And it's okay, well, you don't have a different gut microbiome when you're on vacation. You're not a different human. You don't transport into an alternative universe or something when you go on your trip. So what is it about that environment that allows your body to handle that food that is not translating at home? And what can we do to maybe adjust things? Because like you said, there's going to be people that it has to be black and white. You're allergic, celiac, certain things that need to be 100%. I think that's rare in the grand scheme of things. It's rare for someone to have that level of black and white restrictions around their food. And I always just like to find evidence that even if it's one time that they ate something and they were totally fine, or they went out to eat, they were totally fine, or they had their mom's cookies and I didn't get a stomach ache. So just really starting to challenge the beliefs that somebody has, and getting to a place where that doesn't mean you have to eat cookies every time they're presented to you. And maybe if you were to eat cookies every day, maybe your stomach would not feel good. But being able to say, in your brain, I know that I can have cookies sometimes and I know I'm able to tolerate it. That doesn't mean I need to eat cookies every day. It just means if I want a cookie, I know it's not going to kill me. I'm not going to feel horrible because I've eaten them before and been fine. So anyway, that was just kind of my perspective on lowering standards, because I could like I said, playing devil's advocate, I can hear in my head clients that say, well, I have to be 100% on this, or I'm going to be sick, or I'm going to have this illness or something. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not.
Yeah. I think I actually had my doctor challenge that same, me saying to him, well, if I go out to dinner, I'm going to feel sick. And he said, do you feel sick all the time when you eat food, when you have certain foods? And I remember thinking, whenever I go on vacation, I don't have those issues as much. And what I realized and what I tell clients is a lot of the times that you potentially feel sick is because of the amount of stress that you're under. And so again, that flight or fight response where your digestive system is not functioning as well as it should when you're under stress. So when you go on vacation, you're relaxed, you're able to digest food the way it should be. And so your body is able to handle it better. And so again, teaching people how to manage their stress and giving them that tool as well to teach them so that way they can enjoy, like you said, the occasional cookie and actually you were the one that challenged me to step out of the mindset about being so hardcore about gluten, because I was reading through your About Me page and you said something about you enjoy the occasional gluten-free dessert. And I remember thinking, Laura Schoenfeld eats gluten-free dessert, or the occasional gluten-containing dessert. And I was like, Laura eats gluten occasionally. And I was it made me so happy because it's almost as if it gave me permission to. That was back, years ago when I started following you. But I think just challenging, you're so right, challenging that mindset of why, is it really necessary 100% of the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said with first of all, that's really cool that you remember that. I was like, oh, I wrote that probably years ago. So yeah, I wasn't thinking that was going to change anybody's life, but it's good to hear that it made an impact on yours. And what I was going to say with the eating on vacation and feeling like everything digests well, I mean, there's been, I can't even tell you how many clients I've had tell me that story that every time I go on vacation, my digestion's fine. I can eat anything I want and I'm totally fine. And then when they're back and they're talking to me and they're like, well, maybe I should get my gut tested. Maybe there's something like dysbiosis or whatever. And I'm like, your gut does not radically change leaving your home and going somewhere. Yeah, there's going to be some adjustments to the water and the food and that kind of thing, but you don't get this new gut microbiome that goes back to the way it was when you get home. And so it's challenging them to look at what else is it about that environment that's actually creating that digestive symptom. So the stress, maybe just perceiving that, oh, this is going to hurt me. And there's some crazy things that your body will do in response to your thoughts. So just thinking that something's going to make a stomach ache can create a stomach ache. Even when you're on vacation and you're like, I'm going to eat whatever I want, you're probably not eating things like zucchini noodles and cups of broccoli when you're eating out on vacation. And so if somebody's eating tons of vegetables at home because that's quote unquote healthy, and then they go on vacation, they eat like a normal person because they're like, I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to have rice. I'm going to have dessert. I'm going to have the things that I enjoy. That can be a sign that, hey, actually eating too many vegetables is triggering your gut problems, not gluten or something like that. So
definitely.
I always just like to use those examples to help them think critically about what the beliefs are. Because at the end of the day, if somebody needs to avoid gluten, I'm the last person to say gluten-free is, nonsense. It's a fad, because I don't believe that. I really do think there's a lot of people out there that should not eat gluten for their health. Mm-hmm. But because of that, it's turned into this thing where it's now everybody has to be gluten-free because gluten is going to kill everyone. And that's clearly not true either. So I feel like challenging beliefs around anything, let alone food and fitness, is so important to not just let yourself run on autopilot and just oh, well, I heard this on a podcast 5 years ago that gluten causes leaky gut. So now I'm never going to touch gluten for the rest of my life. It's is that actually helping you live your best life? Maybe not. So anyway, obviously I could talk about this stuff forever, and I want to make sure I let you let you get your perspective in. And just to take a total left turn, one of the things I enjoy connecting with you about is the faith piece when it comes to bringing that into your business, because it's not super common. Again, another one of these kind of taboo topics in the ancestral health paleo world, because everyone's all evolution and all that stuff. And you start talking about God or Jesus, and people are like, you're an idiot. And to be fair, not everybody does that, but it definitely happened to me a little bit when I kind of started coming out about my faith beliefs and everything. And so I'm curious for you, because I know that faith is really important in your own personal life. I have two questions. And the first is, how does your faith affect your personal food and fitness choices? And then the second question is, how do you incorporate your faith into your business if you do it at all? Because I know, like I said, it could be hard to incorporate that in a lot of ways. And I'm just curious if it shows up for you in the work that you do. So the first question is, how does it affect your food and fitness choices?
So the way it currently affects them is, there's a scripture that your body is a temple. And I believe that spiritually our bodies are a temple, and then physically our bodies are a temple. And I think, we can take that and definitely obsess over it and, use it as justification to only eat, perfect all the time. But I also think we can use it as justification to nourish our bodies appropriately, so that way we can do the work that God has for us. And so I know for me, I'm a lot more effective in my job if I can think clearly, and if I have energy, and if I don't, feel crummy. And so a big part of that for me is eating well. If I'm not eating well, if I'm not putting nourishing food in my body, 80% of the time, then I don't perform at my best, because I really do believe that my job is my ministry. And then the other side of that, I would say, is also with exercise. I'd gotten to a point with exercise where I was idolizing it. It was really taking the front seat to my relationship with God. And, I would justify it in my mind as, again, just trying to take care of my body. But it was definitely, I was consumed by making it to the gym, even if I had to miss my time with him in the morning, I would go to the gym. And obviously that's not the place where I want to be, because I know that my relationship with Christ is the most important thing to my well-being. I wouldn't have good well-being if I didn't have that relationship. And so I would definitely say that my faith has completely changed since I have stopped obsessing about my health and stopped obsessing, because I also think I was trying to control my health versus just letting God be in control. And I, thought like if I had enough faith, then God would heal my anxiety, when it really wasn't a matter of having enough faith. It was just a matter of trying to letting go of control and letting him, lead the way, and healing my anxiety in whatever way he saw fit, whether that was through nutrition or through medication or through counseling, versus me trying to be in control. And then with my clients, I always ask my clients actually, this was an idea I took from you, in their intake paperwork, if they have a spiritual practice that's important to them, and then they can say yes or no, and then what it is. And if I do have a client that mentions that yes, they do, and it's Christianity, then I am very vocal to them about, the interconnectedness of, their spiritual life and their physical life. And I know this sounds kind of hokey, but I actually do pray for all of my clients, on a name by name basis. And I know that as my business gets bigger, it's going to be much harder to do that, but I do try to prioritize praying for them, because I honestly know that the results that they're getting, I'm not doing on my own. Like they're coming from God and the gifts that God has given me. And so I just really, if I have the opportunity to tell them that, I do, but I also don't ever want to force it upon my clients, of course, just because that's not ethical. But if I have the opportunity to share it with them, I definitely do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that question has been really helpful for me in my intake paperwork for my one-on-one clients, just knowing if it's something that they are willing to discuss. Because sometimes they'll say that they're Christian, and the question that says, is this something you want to incorporate into our conversation? They sometimes say no. And that's totally okay. And that's why I asked that question, because it's like their faith, whether or not it's similar to mine, that doesn't mean that it's automatically something that they're comfortable or desiring to talk about. And sometimes people really are just coming to me for that functional medicine, nutrition therapy side of things. Like they just want to know what supplements they should be taking and what food they should be eating. And, I do my best to, if I hear things that are coming up that I'm like, this probably should be dealt with, I'll note it to them so they know that hey, this is, whether it's us talking about it or someone else, this is definitely something that needs to be part of the puzzle. always referring clients to therapy. It's like, it's like, I am not a therapist, even though sometimes it feels that way with the kind of conversations we have. And I really think that a lot of people can benefit immensely from that if they need it or if it would be helpful to them. So, but I also make sure, like, if I think something's affecting their physical results with our work together, I'll mention it, and like I said, I don't need to like have a long conversation about it or, try to make them talk about something that they're not comfortable talking about. But I just want them to know, like, hey, you're doing all this work with your food and your fitness and your supplements. Don't miss this big part of it too, because you're going to beat your head against the wall trying to fix this problem if you're not addressing this, elephant in the room that I'm sure is contributing. Like things like trauma, for example. I mean, I've heard some stories where people have had some really traumatic experiences and that's what led to their health problems. And we can only do so much to heal their bodies if they're not also concurrently healing the trauma too. So I'll always be like, I think this is something that really needs to be a part of it. And I've even told a couple of potential clients before that I'm like, I'd be happy to work with you, but first you need to get a therapist and get me like a signed documentation that you're working with that therapist before we can work together. Cause I'm like, I'm not trying to come in here and pretend like food and exercise and micronutrients and herbs and stuff are the answer to, unresolved trauma, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That was a little bit of a tangent. But what I was going to say is that one cool thing about having the Fed and Fearless coaching program is that everyone's kind of like said yes to wanting that faith-based element. And it's been really cool to watch how that piece can take, the kind of mindset and physical health results that without the faith piece, you can get results. Like, I'm not going to say, oh, nobody's ever going to get results if they don't incorporate faith into it, because that's obviously not true. But just watching, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire when somebody incorporates the faith piece into the work that they're doing around body image, around how they feed themselves, that kind of thing. So that's been really exciting for me to be able to have that avenue to take things to that level with a group that's hungry for it, because it's great to do that one-on-one, but I think having it be like a group of women definitely adds an extra level of like, there's just something different about it.
Definitely the community and that you and camaraderie that you probably get through that.
Yeah,
definitely.
So I think you and me both, I'm sure, see a lot of people that use it and see the benefit, and then other people that either have no awareness of it, or if they do have an awareness, they're not incorporating it into the conversation. And I mean, I don't want to make assumptions, but do you see a difference in people's results when they're including their faith as part of the work that they're doing?
I see a difference in the level of intimacy in our time together, meaning like, I feel like I'm able to kind of get down a little bit deeper in the work that I do with them, because we touch on things that maybe are like something that other clients don't want to talk about. And so like, I'm able to really get down into what are like some of the stressors and traumas, not in a counseling way, but that could be affecting like your stress levels. And we talk about things that they can be doing, like journaling and praying, which I think in the typical world is like people kind of go towards meditating, which obviously meditating has benefits. I'm not dissing meditating. It's great. But using that time that people, usually spend meditating and prayer. And so when I do see a difference in the depth of our visits whenever I'm able to incorporate our faith. Mm-hmm. And I feel like my clients just have a more of an innate trust once we've talked about those things. And just a connection that I don't feel like I have as much with my clients that we don't talk about those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like from a business perspective, that's one of the reasons why getting really clear about the kind of clients that you work with can be so beneficial, because it's not to say that you don't like the people that you work with that don't talk about faith or anything like that. It's just when you have that foundational belief system that connects you, I think you can really get to another level of transformation that wouldn't be possible if there wasn't that connection. So again, it's not like we're saying you don't get any results for people unless they are praying about it, but just being able to talk about stuff that wouldn't normally come up in a functional medicine appointment or something like that, I think is, can be really cool for the clients, especially because it's not super common to have that experience with a provider. And normally, especially in the paleo functional medicine world, like they're into more of that like new agey kind of spirituality, or just spirituality is not a part of the conversation.
Right.
So I'm glad that we have the kind of businesses that allow us to go in that direction, because I'm sure if we were working for somebody else or we were working in a hospital or something, like we'd probably get fired if we like brought that stuff up. So,
yeah,
or we'd have at least a visit to the HR department. So
definitely. I also think that, if I have a client that has said on their paperwork that they don't, want to incorporate the faith piece, I obviously am treating all of my clients the same level of, time and my energy. But I do think that whenever you have Christ inside of you, you have a love that permeates through, your conversations. And so I'd like to believe that even if we never get to have that faith conversation, that through, the way that I treat them, the way that I love them, the way that I, take care of them as a practitioner, they'll see something different in me. And, hopefully that will change, the trajectory of their future. But then also just helping people find freedom in general. I think whenever you're so caught up in your own health and obsessing about your health, I think it's really easy to become very self-centered and not be thinking about, your faith or about, the world around you. And once you're able to let people or help people let go of that, then it gives them the opportunity to maybe consider things beyond, themselves. And so even if we never get to have that conversation, I like to believe that God is still working, in their lives through our time together.
Yeah, I'm sure that's happening. I have no doubt. And actually, it's funny because with the Fed and Fearless program that we've run, one of the components of it is the fearless pursuit of purpose, which the whole program is structured around the idea that food and fitness should be fueling your purpose. It's not your purpose to be fit or to eat perfectly or anything like that. It's you have a God-given purpose that eating well and exercising is something that will help you fulfill that purpose because you have the energy and the vibrancy to do so. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about purpose, and being that the podcast is called Fed and Fearless, I like to talk about overcoming fear if possible. And as we kind of mentioned briefly in the beginning of our conversation, we worked together over the summer, helping you go pretty quickly from employed to self-employed. And I remember it was something that you had planned to take a little bit slower before we were chatting. And I was like, what are you waiting for? Like, it's not going to get any easier. It's like, and I get it. Like most people want to have like a clear plan and like confidence that yes, I'm going to have my income 100% replaced as soon as I step into this new role. And something that I've really learned as an entrepreneur is that there's nothing ever guaranteed. And the worst thing you can do is try to wait until the circumstances are perfect to take action, because they never will be perfect. So all of that said, you launched your own business this year, super exciting. What would you say helped you overcome the fear that can often accompany big leaps of faith like the one you had to take to start your business?
I mean, honestly, I don't know that I ever fully overcame the fear. I think I just decided I was going to face it and, not let it affect my future. And so when I decided to start my business, I originally planned on launching it in July. This was back in February. And then I ended up launching it in May. So I ended up launching it 2 months earlier. And I was terrified to leave my full-time job because it was a stable income. Because I didn't think I would get clients very quickly. And I was partially providing, my husband and I, provided for our family together. So by leaving my job, I would need to get a part-time job or bring in some kind of extra income to continue to our same standard of living. And so I was like worrying about, should I get a job at Starbucks? But then I can't dedicate to my business, all of these things. And within, a month of getting started, I already was at a place where I didn't need to get a part-time job. And so I think for me, the way that I overcame that fear was just believing and knowing that God had always been faithful to me up till that point. Like he had never not provided for me, and knowing that ultimately he would continue to be faithful, and it might not turn out exactly how I had planned it to, but that it would turn out the way it was supposed to, simply because I was giving it over to God. And I would also say that I just decided to take it one step at a time, just one day at a time. I tried not to worry about the next month or the next month. And I'm still in that process, because it's still very much a new business 5 months in. And I'm just deciding, okay, it's just one day at a time, 1 week at a time. And so I would say just taking the step, deciding to do it, and, believing that God will give you exactly what you need each and every day. And he's probably not going to show you the full picture. He rarely ever does. It's never like, this is what it's going to turn out like. You have to just believe in that day that's ahead of you. Actually, I clung to the verse, do not be anxious about everything, or do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, present your requests to God, and the peace of God will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. And I just continued, every single day, do not be anxious about anything. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, in prayer, and just continued to, I guess you could say, make that my daily mantra until I actually believed it. And now I believe it. Now I'm super confident in what God can do in my business. I'm like, let's take all these big leaps of faith, because they they pay off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And full disclosure, almost 6 years in, that doesn't change. It's not like you get to a place where all of a sudden everything's clear and you're like, I see every single step that I have to take for the rest of my life. And I work with a lot of business mentors that are even ahead of me. And it's like, they all have the exact same experience. So one of my mentors, James Wedmore, always says, new levels, new devils. So it's basically like every time you level up to another level of yourself in business, in life, we're talking about growing a business, but I think honestly, a lot of what I've learned as far as coaching my clients comes from the work I've had to do as becoming a business owner and growing a business. And for me, a lot of it has come from transitioning from primarily one-on-one to this group coaching thing that takes a whole different level of awareness and bravery, courage, just stepping out into a vision that God put in my heart. And a lot of times not so much a verse, but the mantra that I come back to when I'm making decisions is God doesn't, nothing that God promises is going to fail. So if God tells me, I had a legit download from God at a worship night a couple months ago that was, he basically said to me, your vision for this business is not even as big as mine is for it. And I was like, that's really scary. So not scary that I heard from him, but scary that I was already nervous about the kind of things I was thinking about with the business. And it's oh, don't worry. It's so much bigger than what you're even thinking. And so what really keeps me going with some of the challenges that I've faced as I've transitioned into a different type of business has been that belief that if God says something's going to happen and that there is an outcome that I'm working towards, I can't screw that up.
Right.
The only way I could screw it up is if I say, you know what, I'm not doing it. Right. If I follow through on what he's telling me, it will be successful. My success is inevitable. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know, maybe the vision I have in my head is 180 degrees different than what it's actually going to be. But it is something that when I'm working with business coaching clients or even just friends of mine that are, struggling with their perspective of what their purpose is and, saying, oh, well, I feel like I have this dream or this desire, but I'm too afraid to do it. My thought is hey, if that desire is from God, it won't fail. It may not look the way you think it's going to look, but failure is not going to be your outcome. So that's something, it sounds kind of similar to what you've had going through your mind.
Yeah,
This process.
exactly.
And not to scare you, but it definitely doesn't get to a place where now everything works like clockwork and you never have any challenges. Cause honestly, I think at that point, your business is stagnant. You're kind of cruising. And it's like, okay, is this all that there is for me? And that's where I kind of hit in the last couple of years. And I was like, I know that this isn't all that there is for me. So it's good. It's good to keep practicing taking that action first. Like, okay, let's see what happens after I take this action. Cause I think that's really what makes the difference between someone who's successful and someone who's not, is that willingness to take action in spite of lack of clarity. Mm-hmm. Action is what creates clarity. And this applies to food and fitness and health, like waiting for the perfect moment to make a change, or, expecting to see the full path ahead of you when you're going on a health journey and waiting until that happens. You're never going to experience that. So you have to take steps before you actually see the path. So it's just really cool to see that you're doing all of that. You're putting your money where your mouth is, and you're, investing in yourself, and you're taking massive action that probably feels scary. And maybe you don't feel like you're being fearless, but my definition of fearless is to not let fear get in the way of pursuing your dreams and your purpose. So you're definitely living a fearless life right now.
Well, thank you. I definitely have faced more fear this year than I probably ever have in my life. So honestly, even when before I even started my business, was when I hired you as a business coach. And I remember thinking, I'm hiring a business coach and I haven't even started a business. Like, what if I don't make any money? Like, what if I'm investing in a business coach and then I, totally fail? And that's where a big faith piece came in. And obviously I didn't fail, and it was such a wonderful investment. But I think sometimes you have to, invest something into the future even before you see the outcome of it. And that's one lesson I'm really learning in my business, is investing, whether that be in my time or financially, even before the outcome is there.
Oh yeah. Something that if people hear me talk about James Wedmore relatively frequently, he's like my business guru person. I don't like using the term guru, but it's kind of like a running joke with some of my business coaching clients. Like, I'm always quoting him and they're like it's just funny. But anyway, what I was going to say is I was listening to a podcast with him today talking about money mindset and how investing financially in a goal, in a dream that you have, in a, like somebody who's coaching or consulting with you to help you grow into a next stage of your life, the act of deciding to invest is actually part of the process, because you're deciding that you're going to take this seriously, that this is valuable to you, that you're willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen. And you're going to get that value from it because you're taking it seriously. Because if you think about it, like, I could have coached you for free if I wanted to, right? Like, I could have been like, sure, I'll just mentor you, no problem. Do you think you would have pushed yourself to take those leaps if you hadn't put any money down? Yeah. No. So, and
not to the same degree, at least.
Well, it might have taken you longer. You might have been more cautious, because you deciding to invest in that coaching program, you were like, I'm doing this, come hell or high water. I'm going to make this happen. Like, I'm going to do what it takes. And you're doing it, right? Like, it catapulted you into this process of taking risks, seeing that, hey, you actually get rewarded from the risks, even if it feels scary. What else is possible, right? And so I think because I always kind of go back and forth about what kind of pricing structure I want to have with my business. Because on one hand, I want to make it accessible, but on the other hand, I want people to get results. And in our line of work, I can't hand someone results, right? Like, they have to be the ones that make it so that come hell or high water, they're making it happen. And so that was just really affirming for me to hear that today, and I've seen it in my own life, where it's like, you invest a pretty penny in something and you're like, I'm making this work because I invested in it. I'm not just going to blow it off. I'm not just going to be timid about it. I'm not going to do nothing. I'm going to take action. And so, whether you're thinking about investing in your health, investing in your business, investing in any area of your life, I just think looking at it as not something that you're losing, but actually something that you're gaining, and you're going to get that value from that investment. Now, obviously, we're not saying go start gambling in Vegas and call it an investment, but working with a practitioner, working with a coach, that kind of thing. That decision to invest in someone to guide you on that journey is the first step in your journey to success. That it's that making that decision. And so, I think it's easy for us to be investing in business coaching and that kind of thing. But I just find that the people who are willing to step up and make that investment in themselves with their health as well, they're the ones that are getting the best results. And it's not because they have more money. It's because they are putting more value on it and they're taking it more seriously.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. So that's a little business tip for all the dietitians listening is I always tell people for your services, like you want to charge an amount of money that's going to help that person make a serious commitment. Mm-hmm. Whatever that, like that could be $100 for somebody, that could be $1,000 for somebody. It doesn't really matter as long as they are taking it seriously and they're seeing it as an investment in themselves. That's what's going to create that transformation for them. So anyway, I could talk about business all day. It's like something I probably, I listen to too many business podcasts. Every time we get in the car, one starts and my husband's like, really? Money mindset again? I'm like, listen, you got to listen to it. It's so good.
I know. My husband always gives me a hard time because I'm like, guess what I just learned in this podcast? Or if I tell him something new, he's like, did you learn about that in a podcast? It's always about a podcast.
You're like, yes, podcasts are amazing.
Yeah.
That's why we're making
listen to more of them. Yes.
Okay. So I have two more questions and I want to respect your time. And I know we could probably chat about this forever. What would you say is the big vision for the work you're doing in your business and the impact that you hope to have on the world?
That question is definitely
it's an easy one. One sentence.
Ultimately, I mean, I don't have like a set like number of, women that I, have a plan of reaching. Obviously the more, the better. But I think ultimately I just, even if it's just a handful of women that I'm able to reach, of course, I'd love to reach more, but I just really want to be able to help women overcome obsession with food. Ultimately, like when it comes to like what that looks like for my business, I would eventually like to start some like online courses or an online course for women that they can go through, because you're right. Like you said earlier, sometimes it can be quite the investment to work with a functional practitioner. And so I want to be able to make the services that I provide for my one-on-one clients, I would love to be able to turn that into an online course that women can go through. That's available for them at still a price that is a commitment to them and a challenge for them, but where it's doable for people who maybe can't afford or necessarily can't invest the time into one-on-one coaching. And so I would love to be able to make a digital course, and that's something I'm actually working on right now that I hope to launch in January. It's my plan, at least. And that would obviously open up the ability to help a lot more women. But then also, as my business is growing, I found that like one of my main goals in starting a business was to have more freedom, but it's growing at honestly such a rapid pace that freedom is starting to get
less free.
Less free. And I want to be able to, be a mother one day. And so being able to have an online course where that women can go through, so I'm able to help women, but also still have that freedom in my life to be the mom and the wife and the friend, and just be, a healthy person that's not, totally obsessed with her business. Like I would like to definitely be there. So ultimately, I mean, just reaching more women with the same message and still be able to have freedom in my work-life balance. And yeah, that's what I would say I would like to be.
Awesome. Yeah, I could totally empathize with that. I feel like that was another motivator for me getting less private clients and really moving into the group space, is because it's easy to get kind of crazy with your schedule. And I think I want kids. I always am like on the fence. I'm like, okay, I really like being independent and, just being able to sleep in and stuff, but I also think we want a family. So whether or not we end up having one, like I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to set that up so that I can be present with my family and not be on the computer 60 hours a week. The thing I've realized with group coaching is that there's actually something really empowering about the group coaching component as opposed to working one-on-one with someone. And this is something I've actually learned through my own journey of working with coaches, because sometimes with private coaching, you get so attached to that person being there to help you make decisions and to like give you answers and that kind of thing, that like you don't know what to do without them. Whereas with the group coaching, something that I've noticed is that my clients that do the group coaching, they get to a place where they know how to make decisions and they are willing to go through the learning process so that they can do things for themselves, as opposed to like me just handing them the answer. Because I've realized that handing them the answer is actually not empowering them to understand their bodies and to make choices in the future. And so, yes, like time scaling and income scaling, like all that's great for creating an online course. But I think one of the benefits to our clients is that you're actually going to get a lot more out of learning how to do this stuff for yourself than having it spoon fed to you. So,
totally.
And I'm all about like the hybrid, like, you know, if you want private coaching, like there's certain things I don't want you trying to figure out your supplements on your own, that kind of thing. But like a lot of this like body image and like how to feed yourself, I want them to learn how to do it and not feel like, just tell me what to eat. Cause that's not, I'm sure you agree, it's not the most effective long-term strategy. So, cool. Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
And then I'll let you go because I know we, like I said, could talk forever probably. And this one's not one I shared with you in advance, so it's a little bit of a curveball.
Let me guess, are you going to ask me what my Enneagram is? Because I feel like that's like the new question that everyone asks.
No, is that
everyone.
What is it?
Honestly, I think I was a 2-3, like 2 wing 3 or something like that. But I was prepared in case you asked me because I know that's a really popular question right now.
I'm a 4 wing 3, and being a business owner is making me more of a 3, but I still, my primary motivation is creation and being unique and not achievement. So, okay. So the actual question is, what do you believe makes a person more than a body?
Oh gosh. Honestly, I would say, and this probably sounds super generic, but where their heart is and where their motivation lies. Yeah. So just basically, you know, what's their heart and their motivation and their actions in the way that they treat their own body, but then also in the way that they treat other people. Is it, you know, for selfish gain or for based on pride, or is it more out of self-love and, you know, love for others around them? Because I think you know, a person's heart really says a lot about them, and someone's heart is so much more beautiful than, you know, a physical body that's going to waste away, you know, because we all, eventually this body will fade, and truly our heart. And again, I know it sounds super generic and like Christian-y, but our heart is what truly matters and the spirit that lives inside of us. So I think that's probably what makes a person more than a body.
Awesome. I love that answer. All right. Well, Rachel, I so appreciate your time today. I think the conversation we had was really interesting. Hopefully our listeners have had as much fun listening as I had chatting with you. Where can our community find you online? Because I'm sure they'll want to connect with you and learn more about you and your work now that they've gotten to meet you.
I would love that. So Instagram, my Instagram name is Nourished by Rachel. So I post a lot on there. Right now I'm actually doing a Back to the Basics mini series where I'm talking about the basics of just protein, fat, carbohydrates, just really getting back to the basics of nutrition. And then you can head over to my website. It's just nourishedbyrachel.com. And I have the 5 common weight loss mistakes you're probably making. So 3 of them we mentioned in today's podcast, and there's 2 more on there that you might want to check out to figure out if you're making those 2. And I would also say those same mistakes, you could say 5 things that are ruining your hormones. You know, that's another way of saying it. And I actually thought about changing my lead magnet to say that. So,
well, you could always make a second one, since I'm sure some people are looking for weight loss tips and other people are looking for hormone health, and some people are looking for both. So
yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It was great having you. I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future, and take care. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. If you loved what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes so I can keep sharing my best content with you every week. And use the hashtag Fed and Fearless when sharing the episodes that you love the most on social media like Instagram and Facebook so I can connect with you personally. And if you're enjoying the content I've been sharing on this podcast, you're going to absolutely love my free online training, The 5 Secrets of Fearlessly Healthy Women of Faith. This training covers the 5 most important shifts you must make in order to become truly healthy and free from fear around your health decisions. Listen, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you were created for so much more than fear and frustration around food and fitness. Let me show you how you can experience true freedom in your health and incredible purpose for your life. If you're ready to experience true peace and freedom in your health, here's what I want you to do. To watch this free training, go to fedandfearless.com/free. That's fedandfearless.com/FREE free. You'll get instant access to this 1-hour training, and you'll walk away with a brand new method for approaching health from a faith-based perspective, so you can live the purpose-driven life you were created for. Go get your free download now at fedandfearless.com/free. All right, I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, get out there and be fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, purpose-driven life.